Okay, hi everyone. Very warm welcome to this ISDA webinar, the Common Domain Model, Likezero, transforming ISDA documentation into data intelligence. So just before we get started, just wanted to let you know about a few housekeeping issues. So there's a few buttons on the bottom of your Zoom screen there. If you have any technical AV questions, please put these via the chat, please. And any Q&A related to the webinar, please add those to the Q&A button. We will be taking some Q&As towards the end of the session. Also to mention, this webinar will be recorded and distributed in due course to all those who registered, along with a PDF of the material we are presenting. Okay, some short introductions. Introducing myself, I'm Vernon Alden-Smith, Director at ISDA for Collateral Initiatives. I oversee the solutions adoption of collateral use cases and the chair of the FINOS CDM Collateral Working Group. We also have Imogen Philp, Product Director at Likezero, where she defines the product vision, roadmap, and go-to-market strategy for the Likezero's AI-driven platform, including CDM use cases. So firstly, I wanted to take us through what CDM data structures for collateral use cases exist at the moment and how they've been built over several years and how it has come from a great idea to reality. So firstly, for those not familiar, the CDM or Common Domain Model is a standardized machine readable and machine executable blueprint of how financial products are traded and managed across a transaction lifecycle, including collateral documents and processes. Now, the data dictionary model is quite vast, covering many different products, life cycles of those products, types of legal agreements, how we represent collateral and other collateral processes such as margin calls, etc., and also reference data and map to a set of alternative data representations, including FIX, FPML, ISO 20022. Just to highlight, the CDM is not a software or an application in and of itself, but can be implemented within one to promote composability for reuse of components for efficiency and to promote interoperability. So a little bit of history about the CDM. ISDA initiated the CDM project back in 2017, but it has grown significantly, and now other trade associations such as ISDA and ICMA are involved within the CDM and contributed to the model for their products and processes. And the CDM now resides at FINOS, which is the FinTech Open Source Foundation, where the governance structure and working group formal areas exist, and all the best practices and governance and for the open source community of the members. Collateral use case is a natural crossover across the different product cycles, silos, and many opportunities for the reuse of data across the collateral processes, whether it's sec lending, repo, or collateral. The working group structure has existed for many years, covering many different products and advances in the CDM. So if we look at collateral management in particular, we could probably all appreciate the many different internal and external areas that need to exchange information or data, whether that's for legal agreement data, eligible collateral, or margin calls, etc., across the different processes on the left-hand side. And there's been a lack of industry standards in this area that's led to lots of fragmentation in the industry. So you can probably appreciate internally, you have legal risk, technology, and products exchanging many information, as well as vendors, counterparties, and data providers. Now, what we built in the CDM is a model for representing legal agreement data, how to identify legal agreements and different clauses within, and how we can transform PDFs and CSVs of these documents into standardized data and terms. The coverage, as you can see, is many different CSA versions, initial margin, variation margin, and legacy, and also clauses of the master agreements, covering many different publications, different jurisdictions, and those jointly published with custodians, Euroclear and Clearstream. Also, ISDA has contributed their clause library and taxonomy for the parts of the GMSLA, the different versions as well. In addition to this, we've already contributed structure relevant to umbrella agreements in December 2025, and we're currently working on the contribution for amendments across different document types in Q1 2026. So as you can see, there's quite a wide coverage of different CSAs within the model and the clauses within them. So what does this data look like as CDM? I've included some examples here, and these examples are taken directly from the CDM test sample data that we have. And as you can see here, this is structured data as CDM, showing the different clause election outcomes, highlighting key familiar features of the CSAs. And some of them are highlighted here, such as base currency, notification time, independent amounts and so on, minimum transfer amounts, counterparty details, and the far side here, including LEIs and details of the two parties of the agreement. And all of this is structured as standardized data, and these extracts are in a JSON format. In addition, the CDM gives us coverage for eligible collateral. As most of you know, this area, there's a lack of standardization within the market in how people view eligible collateral terms, in eligible collateral schedules, and how we define different asset types. So throughout our working groups, we've seen many different versions of eligible collateral schedules, and some of them are on this slide here. And I think, the onset of regulatory rules, such as UMR, have added further complexities, different haircuts, different concentration limits, and jurisdictional rules to navigate, which makes this particular area of documentation hard. Now, the CDM can add clarity on using standardized terminology and data to represent this information to promote interoperability and efficiency between systems. So through our working group structure, we've worked with many members over the years to define a model for capturing all the key information for eligible collateral, such as nature of the issuer, the asset type, certain source IDs and taxonomies are also included, concentration limits, maturity profiles, agency ratings, and treatment rules such as valuation haircuts and many different forms of those. So the CDM model has a robust structure in place for representing all of this information in a common format as data. And we've demonstrated it using many different industry samples over several years. This slide shows you an extract from the data model, highlighting the many different data types and attributes that are used for capturing eligible collateral information, and certain wrappers around them who can combine those details accordingly. And this has been tried and tested against many different versions of eligible collateral schedules that we've seen from our working groups. Again, just wanted to show some examples of these eligible collateral schedules as CDM code. As you can see, there's a few examples here covering different agency ratings, different types of assets and issuers of collateral, and concentration limits, and so on. And we do have several of these that are available for you to review if needed. And this slide kind of just summarizes the use cases that can come of this standardized data. And we're seeing many different members, adopt the CDM for varied use cases using standardized legal documentation, such as the CSA or eligible collateral schedules. And that's custody and tri-party, using that to standardize the way that we look at eligibility terms. You can use the CDM. You can use AI to extract, information from documentation and generate that as CDM code, creating standardized versions of the data. We're seeing vendor solutions and counterparties use this mapping logic of the CDM to be able to transfer information in and out of their services for their clients. And we're also seeing the CDM used and data from legal agreements and eligibility terms to develop fintech solutions and DLT. Elements of this can be used as standard terms within smart contracts as we head towards the use of tokenized assets and digital assets. So there's quite a number of use cases for the CDM where standardized data is really beneficial for giving us that true STP and data flow between systems, where institutions can exchange standard terms to speed up processes and improve efficiencies, etc. So that kind of concludes my overview of the CDM and a bit of history about the data that's available. And towards the end, I will be showing another slide that gives you some information on how you can become involved. But I now wanted to hand over to Imogen Philp from Likezero, who's going to now take us through how Likezero have implemented CDM, how they're using it, and a little bit about Likezero and their products. Imogen?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vernon. So I just wanted to start off today by sort of introducing Likezero, just letting you know a little bit about what we do. So Likezero is the market-leading solution for extracting structured data from global markets trading agreements. We've currently grown to support 10 of the world's largest globally systemically important banks. We have even more if you include the clients we have through our partnerships, and we're looking to sort of expand that client base by about another 3, 4, or 5 in the upcoming year. So in terms of sort of what we do, Vernon, if you don't mind just popping on to the next slide. Thank you. So we've processed to date over 1 million agreements across over 120 agreement types. So that includes everything from the ISDAs, the CSAs, which is very relevant for today's webinar, but also things like your JIMRAs, JIMSLAs, MCAs, and prime brokerage agreements. And by processing this many agreements, we hold over 1 billion paragraphs of legal text. And under the Likezero data model, we've extracted over 50 million data attributes across our client documents. But why is this important? Working with this much data has shown us something very clearly. Most of the institutions we work with are still operating on legacy data models that have evolved over many years. And those models vary significantly across organizations. So we understand that adopting a standard model can be very challenging when legacy systems are deeply embedded. Likezero, however, is designed to accommodate those variations. So we're able to normalize that data from sort of the clauses that you see within your contract and transform them into standardized outputs, including the common domain model, which is where we're sort of going to focus today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to share my screen. So what I'm going to go through today is sort of how we are extracting data from these contracts. Specifically, we're going to be looking at a variation margin credit support annex today, and we will show you how we can sort of transform that data into a standardized output, of which is the common domain model. So every single agreement that we load into the system will have its data extracted into the data model on the right-hand side. And the data model that you see on the right-hand side here is the Likezero data model. So this is essentially being curated from all the agreements that we've processed within the system. So all the data that we have seen, or the contracts that we have seen, have helped us to sort of model what you see on the right-hand side. And every single piece of data that we collect against that agreement is linked to the contract itself. So we always have that link between the sort of standardized value on the right-hand side and the legal text on the left-hand side. But for today, we're going to focus on an eligible collateral table specifically. So again, what you can see is the table on the left-hand side has sort of been segmented into different cells. And this is where we have extracted the data from. So same as I was showing before, if I click on any one of these sort of values within the table, we can see exactly which cell that data comes from. Now, again, on the right-hand side, what we've got here is an example of perhaps your client's legacy data model. So this might be how the data is formatted within their own internal systems. What we're then able to do is switch over to the CDM format. So if I switch over to our CDM eligible collateral template, you'll see here that we have the CDM attributes along the top of our table. So again, everything from your sort of margin percentage, your differing ratings, etc., they are all captured within the client data model, as well as the CDM formatted data model. And again, none of this data has changed. It's still linked to the exact cells where we can find that data. So this is just a very simple example here of how we're able to surface within our product the sort of legacy data model that you may have within your own environments, and how we can then transform that to show the data within the CDM format as well. As Vernon was also just showing earlier, what we're then able to do is output that data in the CDM format. So whilst we see it in the UI here, we're also able to publish this data downstream into, say, other systems that might be using the CDM format. We can also output the data in that format downstream. Another sort of area that we are very excited to sort of work with ISDA on around the CDM is the umbrella agreements and the amendments. So both of that functionality is available within our Likezero UI. And I'm just going to demonstrate how both of those work today as well. So we'll start off with the amendments. I'm just going to add in an amendment document here. And we're just going to process this document through our pipeline. So the pipeline is essentially taking the document in, it's looking across that amendment for any relevant data to be extracted, and then it will turn it into that structured format. So what you can see now is, whilst we have just been discussing that there, the amendment has gone through our pipeline, and we can see that there is an update to a row of eligible collateral to the eligible collateral table. So again, on the left-hand side, we have the sort of legal clause, and on the right-hand side, we have the structured data. Again, what we are looking at here on the top is the CDM format, so the CDM names of the attributes. But again, we're also able to switch back to sort of your view of the world as well. So there's always that availability to see the world in the CDM format, as well as your sort of known format that you're potentially used to. Now, at this moment in time, this amendment is a standalone document. We can see that all that's been extracted is the eligible collateral update, but it's not really giving us a present day view of the agreement. So what I'm now going to do is just go back to the document and show you how our classifier works. So our classifier is our implementation of AI into the system, and essentially it's just looking for parameters of the document to classify that amendment. So it's identified that it's an amendment, we have the document date, but we also have some other information which will help us link this amendment to the agreement it's part of. We do have sort of human interaction with the AI. If the AI is not giving us a high confidence value, it will come up in yellow within the UI. So the user is able to validate that data, or if they want to, they can override what the classifier has returned. So we're very sort of in the world of, we're not sort of allowing the technology to guess at anything. If there's any doubt in a piece of data that's being extracted against the documents, there will be human validation in there. These documents can be very complex, as we all know, especially when you get into the eligibility world, so your eligible collateral schedules. So we want to make sure that the data you are receiving in the structured format is of the highest quality. So let me just save that amendment there. And what you will now see is our amendment is now formed part of an agreement. So rather than still being a standalone document, it is now linked to this original document here. And within the UI, you're always able to go back and see each of the documents that are associated with that agreement. What I'm now going to do is I am going to turn on what we call the roll-up functionality. And what you'll see here now is in italics, we are showing the sort of present day view of that eligible collateral table. So everything in non-italics has come from the amendment, but everything in italics is from a previous document. And again, I can click on any one of those values and it will take me back to that original document where that data is found. So similar to the CDM, Likezero allows you to see the present day view of your contract, but also allows you to walk through the sort of changes per amendment for your agreement. Again, this is just honing in on eligible collateral, but this will be the same for any of the agreement terms that are found within the CDM model. We can always show you that sort of contract history. And again, that can be output in the CDM format. So your present day view can be output downstream into the CDM format. The other area that the CDM has touched upon as well is umbrella agreements. So I know that that has been submitted sort of earlier or at the end of last year. So for that, we are going to go into an umbrella agreement. And again, on the left-hand side, we have the contract. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go down and look at this particular eligible collateral table. This is a very simple one. There's no sort of securities or equities, etc. It's just a cash table, but it's referencing the eligible currency. So currently we have no currency code within the UI. What we're able to do within Likezero is actually piece together definitions and references so that we can actually bring back a value for the currency code. So what you'll see here is this is referencing the eligible currency. If I go to the eligible currency clause, it's then referencing the base currency. And if I go to the base currency clause, we can see that it's then referencing Appendix A. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to switch to the legal entity view. And you'll see that we now have a value that has been updated for the currency code. Now, if I select that value, you can see that it's taking me to the appendix where that value is found. So this current view here is our eligible currency view for Fund 1. But if we look at this table a little bit further, what you'll notice is there are differing base currencies depending on the entity pairing. So I'm just going to switch to Fund 8. And here we can see that the currency code has been updated to Euro. Similar again, if I were to select Fund 4, for example, that will update back to US dollar. So essentially what we're able to do within the system is capture those differing values per entity within an umbrella agreement, and very similar to the sort of amendment flow that we just showed there, we're able to output each one of these entity pairings into the CDM format. So you will be given the currency code for Fund 1 as US dollar, the currency code for Fund 8 as an example as Euro, but we also still output against the agreement structure the other relevant information such as the cash asset type. So essentially that's how Likezero is extracting the data. As I mentioned, we're then transforming that data into the CDM format. But where I think the real value of this sort of standardization of data comes into play is when we start to look at what we can do with that data. So there are two areas we're really looking into this at the moment. The first sort of area we're looking at is benchmarking within your own internal systems. So comparing your data across all the agreements that have been loaded into the system. And then the second area is around industry benchmarking. And that's really where we feel the CDM will come into play. So let me sort of move on to that, and I can demonstrate exactly what we mean by this. So this is what we're calling our advanced analytics suite. And this is where we can start to analyze all the data within your environment. And this is really to help our clients gain insight into what they have executed within their agreements on a sort of holistic view. The demonstration that I'm giving today will be in the client format, so how they have their internal systems set up. But again, because we're able to transform that data into the CDM format, this analytics suite can also be set up in the CDM format, so using the CDM attribute names, etc. So the first area that we're going to dive into is just a breakdown of what is in the system. So we can break that down by a number of different sort of pieces of metadata. For example, here we are looking at the jurisdiction, but there may also be relevant metadata such as counterparty type, client tier, and again, these are completely configurable to your client environment. All the information on these contracts can be found in the tables below. And these can be looked at via an agreement level, or if you have umbrella agreements, we can look at that on a counterparty pairing level as well. We can also start to add some scope in there. So you may only, for example, be interested in a particular client tier. And you can see as we start to add on filters, the numbers on the right-hand side change. We're also able to add filters around the actual data that's been extracted. So again, failure to pay may be an example, whether that exists or not. And again, just to reiterate, this can be viewed in a CDM view if we have that transformation available as well. Another thing to note here is whilst we are very committed to sort of transforming the data into the CDM format for CSAs, we are also looking into the ISDA master agreements as well as the SEC lending agreements to help with the sort of development of the CDM in those areas. Now, the next part is around sort of how do we compare a particular attribute. And again, this is where we really feel our clients are going to get value and insight from the data that they are collecting. So what we have here is just showing us across all our agreements what the different grace periods are for a failure to pay. And again, this is where the importance of that structured data really comes into play. Without that sort of structure of the data, it becomes very hard to do a comparison or an analysis. So I cannot stress enough how much we are on board with this sort of standardization of data. Now, what we're essentially saying here is across all our executed agreements, we have 65 instances where the grace period is a 1 day. You can start to see sort of the different variations of the grace period in your agreements in the bar chart here. We're also able to see a trend analysis. So if we were to look at 3 days, for example, because we have ingested the entire legacy backbook of our clients, we're able to give a trend analysis over time. So for example, here we can see that the 3-day grace period is starting to trend upwards. Again, we are not sort of giving any legal advice with this data. We are just handing over this transparency to our clients for them to make sort of evidenced decisions, for them to sort of make decisions based on data, essentially. What we also see here is a use case around sort of negotiation. So if there is a particular term or attribute that is in the middle of being negotiated, this also gives our clients the ability to very quickly identify if that is a value or a term that has been accepted before. And again, we can filter all this down by different sort of metadata. So it may be relevant only to look at hedge funds, for example, as you may be negotiating with a hedge fund. So you only want to see the relevant data associated with that. Again, all of this is completely exportable, and we always have a link back to the document in our core product. So we always have that link between structured, standardized data with the legal clauses and the documents and the agreements themselves. Now, as I mentioned, because we store such a breadth of data against a consistent standardized model, we feel that this opens the door to industry benchmarking. So one of the use cases that we are really looking into is this industry benchmarking. So anonymized, aggregated insights across the market become possible in a way that's not necessarily been achievable before. And we really feel that when you combine clean and high quality structured data with a standard model like CDM, you unlock a lot more than just reporting. And this can help support processes such as collateral optimization, lifecycle event management, and operational efficiency across different teams. So let's go into sort of how we envision that industry benchmarking to look. So what we're essentially saying here is we would like to compare a client's set of agreements, whether that be ISDA agreements, but also our eligible collateral agreements as an example. And let's compare that to what we're calling the Likezero index. So again, because we have ingested so many agreements and data, we're able to compare in a completely anonymized fashion your contracts to the market's contracts. So let's go into this comparison. What this is essentially telling you is that there may be certain terms within your agreements that are slightly off market. And if we go into events of default as an example, this particular trend graph is showing the market trend in the gold line, and then your particular values are shown by the bar. So in this particular example, again, you can see the importance of having that standardized data. But essentially, what we are able to show is that you're pretty much on trend with the market, slightly above trend for these outliers here, but more or less you are following the trend. However, again, we can start to add some more scope in here. So maybe I'm only interested in the counterparty type of a bank. Maybe I'm specifically interested in Greek banks. I know that was relevant a while back. And again, maybe some specific tiers here as well. And what you'll start to see is that you're starting to go slightly more off trend when we filter down to a specific scope. So you still are sort of following the market trend, but you are trending towards a little bit more risk in this case here. And if I go into that particular 3-day grace period, this is essentially showing you the so what. Once you've seen you have more risk than the rest of the market versus a certain counterparty type on certain terms, this screen is essentially showing you where the risk is in your own book. We can see, for example, which entities are impacted, and theoretically, we can also add in trade level or product level attributes of the CDM to be brought in alongside with exposures overlaid. So essentially what we're showing here is that the benchmarking identifies the gap to the market, but this particular page has the potential to show you the shape of that gap and where it is within your own books. So whilst we're always going sort of across the market and looking at it from a wider lens, we're always able to bring you back in to your own book. And again, as I sort of mentioned there are so many opportunities where the CDM outside of the legal agreements can be brought in to enhance that analytics as well. So I think that's sort of the majority of what I wanted to go through today. I think just to iterate on the points that I wanted to get across today, we really do believe, after having seen such a huge amount of data in the industry, that having this standardized model and really adopting the CDM is going to open the door to a lot of future sort of product initiatives. So mark to market, as I've just shown here in the industry benchmarking, as one. I know Vernon alluded to earlier sort of the tokenization in the digital assets world. It's really important there that we also have a standardized view of the data in order to really reap the benefits of that. So I think I'm just going to hand back to Vernon, if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Imogen. That's brilliant. A great demo. Really good overview of what you're doing with CDM. It's really exciting to see this in action and being used in so many different places. And as you mentioned, you know, the depth of the analysis is really broad, and you know, that will obviously continue. And I think if more and more are using the CDM, as an option to standardise their legal agreement and eligible collateral data. There's lots of different use cases that can emerge from this. I think this is just the beginning, so it's really an exciting time. Obviously, thanks everyone for listening. We wanted to try and get some questions from people. If anyone has any, please drop them in the Q&A while we're waiting for those to come through. You may have already mentioned this, Imogen, as you went through, but obviously you've done a lot of work with the CDM already for the different versions of the CSAs and the umbrella agreements. I know there's more to come related to amendments, so obviously what you're doing will be ongoing. But where do you see your next steps in development using the CDM currently?
Yeah, so we are really, really keen to sort of help and suggest out with expanding the ISDA CDM data model, so the master agreement CDM data model. Again, just like the CSAs, we have ingested a huge amount of those ISDA master agreements. We've really seen kind of how the industry is negotiating those clauses. So we are very keen to kind of help suggest and expand that. I know that we will be joining the next ISDA working group, where we're keen to kind of make some suggestions there with some examples of what we've seen in the industry. And we're also very keen to sort of help out with the ISLA CDM as well. So very similar. We've seen sort of those set lending documents throughout our time. So we will be on those working groups that are upcoming and sort of suggesting some inputs there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I know that there is some clauses related to the master agreement already in the CDM model, but we're looking to expand that further, especially related to those, operational clauses that need to be stored in systems for different use cases. So I will be sharing a slide soon about all the different working groups with links on, etc., that we will send out to everyone. But there is the legal technology group that will be looking to expand the master agreement. So if you're not a member of that group, please join. So let's see if we've got any questions through. So a quick look. This is an interesting one. So how long does it currently take to implement the CDM into a service model for collateral use cases? I think from my experience, obviously we've seen, adoption from several different places over the last year or two. I'd say commonly between 3 to 6 months from our observations. And obviously that's dependent on internal resources and technical capacity. ISDA does have a technical team that can help direct people in the right direction to how to get started, and there's several resources on our website. But from my experience, it's typically, 3 to 6 months. Imogen, is there anything from your side? Would you agree with that, or is it less or more?
Yeah, so from our side, because we have the transformation sort of already built to the CDM, there's no sort of uplift from our side from a technical perspective there. That's if our clients choose to adopt the Likezero data model when they're extracting the data. For more sort of bespoke terms, perhaps that they want viewed in their own particular data model to then be transformed into the CDM. Again, it's a minimal amount of effort to do that transformation. In terms of actually extracting the data, to give you a sense of kind of the volumes. So we have clients who are ingesting around 250,000 agreements, documents within our system, and the implementation there typically takes 6 to 9 months. But that's not to say we can't show value at a much sooner date, as obviously as we're processing through the documents, we can still output the data in the format. So you can see the benefits sort of similar to yourselves in 3 to 6 months, I would say.
Great, thank you. So let's look what else we've got. This is quite an interesting one. So legal agreements often contain quite bespoke language or nuanced drafting. So from your experience on that, how far can Likezero and the CDM realistically capture that level of granularity?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one.
Sure.
So for us, again, I'll keep coming back to the fact that because we have seen sort of the majority of the market data, we have seen all those different nuances and we have standardized them. So just as an example, base currency you'd think would be a fairly standard clause. I think we are, and still counting, seeing over 4,000 different variations of the base currency clause, which we have captured, we have standardized, and we can then output into the CDM. So we know it's there. We know that it's a challenge, but we feel that we're well equipped to sort of deal with those nuances.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think from my point of view, obviously being involved with modelling the different clauses within the CDM, each clause normally has an additional language section for any bespoke language that can be captured. So anything can be captured from a document. If there is any bespoke terms that are quite unique, these can be captured as a data string and pulled into the series of data that can be produced as CDM. And if you're familiar with the model, most clauses include that level of additional language. As we've developed CDM, we've used information that's been collected over many years in the ISDA clause library of all the various outcomes across thousands and thousands of documents of every different election structure and outcomes and options of those that we've seen in documents, and that detail has been used to develop the CDM. So it has coverage of most of the things you'd typically see in an ISDA document, an ISDA CSA. Let's have a look at some more questions here. Yeah, this one's here. It might be difficult to answer this one, but let's give it a go. Data ingestion. Is there a model workflow where an ISDA, a GMRA, or an MSFTA, etc., where legal negotiations happen in the platform and stored to benefit both parties? There's nothing like this in the CDM. Obviously, the CDM is a data model where the data of each of these documents can be represented. Obviously, there is, negotiation platforms such as ISDA Create that are capable of producing CDM through the negotiation process and the finalisation of a document. Is there anything from your side, Imogen?
Yeah, so we're sort of mainly focused on the actual digitization piece and then how that data can be used outside of it. I think what's interesting, though, is how the industry might be moving into a world of smart contracts. So we speak about sort of digital assets tokenization and potentially negotiating on-chain. So we sort of see that that's where the industry is going. And again, it's really important for that to be a viable option, that we do have that standardization to assist with the on-chain sort of negotiation. So again, Likezero, very similar to you guys at ISDA, we don't have the actual negotiation within our platform, but we feel that we have the insight and the data to assist with those processes. And then in the future, we are potentially looking at how we can create those kind of smart contracts going forward.
Okay, we have another one here. Have there been any surveys to gauge market adoption of the CDM model? Specific to collateral, there's been no specific surveys, but we do know how many firms have adopted it and in production. There's 4 production use cases using across the CSA and eligible collateral currently, and there's probably there's a handful also of other firms that are under analysis, POC development kind of work, looking towards committing to a full implementation. So I mean, we could take that one away to potentially think about a further survey to gather more information on that, but we've got a pretty good idea of who's currently adopted the model and is using it, certainly for the collateral use cases. Let's see what else we have. Let's maybe got time for 1 or 2 more. There's one on the working groups. So do you have to be an ISDA member to join these working groups? Not all of them. The open source community working groups led by Finos are all open source, so anyone can join those. That would be the CDM collateral working group and the other working groups for different areas of the CDM model. some for securities lending, for example, and other product areas of the CDM model. The ISDA Legal Technology Working Group, which relates to specific development of legal documents within the CDM, that is closed to ISDA members only, due to, obviously, it's dealing with specific language of ISDA documents, so that's the reasoning behind that. But a majority of the CDM working groups are open source and anyone can join them. So hopefully that answers that question. I think that's possibly all we've got time for. There are other working groups that do cross over with collateral. There's the tokenized assets working group that's led by Finos, that covers the development in CDM for digital assets and tokenized assets, and how to use data standards to label those things correctly using data types and attributes. So obviously, if that's of interest to you, please join that working group. What I'll do now is I'll share my screen with some information on some of the resources that we have on the ISDA website, etc. Bear with me. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen share now. This deck is the final page of the deck, and this deck will be sent out to everyone with the recording of the webinar, probably middle of next week by the time it's been edited and everything's checked. But at the very last page, there's a number of links here that take you through, the QR code takes you through to the Collateral Initiatives webpage on the ISDA website, that contains quite a lot of information about the CDM and collateral use cases. There's quite a detailed startup guide with different modules introducing the CDM. It's worth looking through that in a bit more detail. There's links here for subscribing to the different working groups, so the CDM Collateral Working Group, the ISDA Legal Technology Working Group, and there's also some links to other CDM working groups here, and it's the first link there, the Finos groups, takes you to all the CDM related working groups that you can have a look. So there's any other areas that may be of interest, and there's a link here to CDM collateral sample data as well. So please take time to look at that particular slide and click through to all the different resources to find out more about what's going on. Okay, so thanks so much, Imogen. It was really interesting. Excellent demo. And I hope everyone's enjoyed the webinar. And thank you, everybody, for the questions. Hopefully we answered the questions. If any more come through and we haven't answered them, we'll try to get back to you individually with answers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll close the webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.